buckling up today. We're diving deep into TestNG. You sent over some articles and interview notes. Looks like you're really trying to get a handle on this framework.
Yeah, and you've come to the right place whether you're facing a tough QA interview or just kind of curious about how software gets tested. Understanding TestNG can be a game changer.
Okay, so first things first. For those of us who haven't spent all day, knee-deep in code, can you remind us what TestNG is all about?
Absolutely. So TestNG stands for Test Next Generation, and it's a powerful framework that helps developers make sure that their software, actually does what it's supposed to do. It's all about writing tests, organizing them, running them efficiently, and then actually understanding the results.
So it's not just about finding bugs. It's about the whole process of making testing, smooth and, dare I say, even a little bit enjoyable.
Yeah, nobody likes spending hours trying to figure out why a test failed or wading through messy reports. So TestNG helps streamline that whole testing workflow.
I'm seeing a lot about annotations in these materials. Can you break down what those are and why they're so important in TestNG?
Sure. So imagine annotations as these little labels that you put on your code to give TestNG instructions. So instead of writing tons of extra code to tell TestNG what to do, you can use annotations like @test to mark a method as a test case, or @before method to set things up before each test, and @after method to clean up afterward. It's like speaking TestNG's language in a really concise way.
That actually sounds pretty elegant, but wouldn't adding all these annotations make the code more complex?
It might seem that way at first, but annotations actually make your test code more readable and maintainable in the long run. Think of it this way. A well-placed annotation is like a clear signpost that tells everyone exactly what that piece of code is doing.
So it's less about writing more code and more about writing smarter code.
Precisely. And in the world of software development where things change constantly, having clear, maintainable code is absolutely crucial.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal you mentioned. TestNG helps with running tests efficiently. One article highlights parallel execution. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, think about it. If you have hundreds or even thousands of tests to run, doing them one after the other could take forever. With TestNG, you can configure it to run multiple tests at the same time, which can dramatically speed things up.
So it's not just about saving a few minutes. It's about getting faster feedback, which means developers can find and fix bugs more quickly, right?
Exactly. Faster feedback loops are essential for agile development. The sooner you know about a problem, the easier it is to fix it. Plus, nobody wants to wait hours for tests to finish running before they can move on to the next task.
Speaking of organizing tests, I'm seeing this concept of grouping test cases. What's that all about?
Grouping is a really neat way to categorize your tests based on their purpose. So say you have some tests that are just basic sanity checks. You could group those under smoke tests. Then you might have a group called regression tests for checking if old bugs have reappeared. It's all about organizing your tests in a way that makes sense for your workflow.
So instead of running all the tests every single time, you could choose to run just the smoke tests for a quick check, or focus on specific groups based on the feature you're working on. That sounds incredibly useful, especially as a project grows.
Exactly. TestNG gives you that flexibility to tailor your testing strategy to your needs.
Now things are starting to get a little tricky. I'm seeing these terms priority and dependent methods. They seem kind of similar, but I'm guessing there's a subtle difference.
You're spot on. There's a key distinction with priority. You're basically telling TestNG the order in which you want your test methods to run. You assign a number, and the lower the number, the earlier it runs. Think of it like creating a numbered to-do list for TestNG.
So if I want test login to run before test checkout, I'd give test login a lower priority number.
Exactly. It ensures that tests that depend on the outcome of earlier tests run in the correct order now. Depends on methods is more about creating dependencies between individual test methods.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice?
Let's say test checkout relies on a successful login with depends on methods. You can tell TestNG, hey, don't even bother running test checkout if test login fails. It's like a safety net that prevents cascading failures and helps you pinpoint the root cause of issues.
That's a really smart way to avoid wasting time on tests that are bound to fail anyway. It seems like TestNG is all about efficiency at every level.
It is, and that brings us to another powerful feature, data-driven testing. This is where TestNG really shines when it comes to streamlining your testing efforts.
Data-driven testing sounds intriguing. What's the magic behind that?
Imagine you have a login form you need to test. Instead of writing separate tests for every possible username and password combination, which would be a nightmare, you can use data-driven testing to run the same test logic with different sets of data.
So you write the test once and then feed it different data that sounds way more efficient.
It is. TestNG makes this super easy. With the @DataProvider annotation, you essentially create a method that provides an array of data, and TestNG will run the test method once for each set of data. It's like running a single test with multiple variations, saving you a ton of time and effort.
This is making a lot of sense. I'm already starting to see how TestNG can help me write better tests and get more meaningful feedback.
And we're just getting started. We haven't even touched on what happens when tests fail, how TestNG handles reporting, or the magic of listeners.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. We'll dive into those topics next time. Okay, we're back and ready to uncover more secrets of TestNG. Last time we talked about annotations, grouping priorities, dependencies, and even data-driven testing. All these cool features that make TestNG so powerful.
Yeah, and today we're going to explore what happens after you run your tests, like how TestNG helps you actually make sense of those results and get some valuable insights from your testing efforts.
Right, that sounds pretty crucial.
Yeah.
I mean, what good are tests if you can't understand what they're telling you?
Exactly. That's where reporting comes in. And one of the things I love about TestNG is that it automatically generates these really detailed reports. After each test run, you get both like HTML and XML versions, which give you a comprehensive overview of, what happened, which test passed, which failed, how long each test took to execute, and so much more.
So it's like having this built-in documentation of your testing process, which seems incredibly valuable, especially when you're working on a large project with multiple team members.
It becomes the single source of truth that everyone can refer to. You can quickly see the overall health of your test suite. You can drill down into specific failures to understand what went wrong.
But I'm guessing there are times when you need even more than these standard reports.
You're right. Sometimes you want to customize the look and feel of your reports or add some extra, bells and whistles. And the good news is TestNG is super flexible when it comes to reporting. Like, it integrates really well with third-party reporting libraries like Extent Reports and Allure.
Bells and whistles, does that mean I can have charts, graphs, maybe even some cool animations in my reports?
Absolutely. These libraries let you create these stunning interactive reports that are not only informative, but also really engaging. You can even embed screenshots and videos to provide visual context for your test results. It's all about presenting the information in a way that's clear, insightful, and even a little bit fun.
That sounds way better than staring at lines of text in a plain HTML file. Okay, so we've got reports covered. What about these listeners? I keep seeing mentioned they sound kind of like those tiny microphones spies use to eavesdrop on conversations.
Well, TestNG listeners aren't quite that secretive, but they do play a key role in keeping track of what's happening during your tests. Think of them as these special interfaces that allow you to listen to different events during that test execution lifecycle.
So they're like event handlers that get triggered when something specific happens during a test run.
Exactly. For instance, you could have a listener that logs a message every time a test starts, passes, or fails. Or you could have a listener that takes a screenshot whenever a test fails, which is super helpful for debugging.
I could see how that would be a game changer for, tracking down those tricky intermittent bugs. You wouldn't have to manually reproduce the failure to see what went wrong.
Right. And the power of listeners lies in their flexibility.
Sure.
You can use them for all sorts of things, from sending out notifications to integrating with external systems. It's like having this extra layer of control and customization over your testing process.
That's pretty impressive. Okay, so we've talked about individual tests, but what happens when you have multiple test classes? I'm seeing something about prioritizing test execution across different classes. Is that similar to the priority attribute we talked about earlier for methods?
It's a similar concept, but applied at a higher level. Remember, the priority attribute controls the order of test methods within the same class, but sometimes you need to control the order in which entire test classes are executed.
Ah, I see. So it's like setting a running order for all the different actors in your testing play.
That's a great analogy. And TestNG lets you do this using the test.xml file. You basically define multiple test tags in the XML, each representing a different test class, and then use the priority attribute on those tags to dictate the order.
So if I have test class A and test class B, and I want A to run before B, I just give the test tag for A a lower priority number in the XML file.
Exactly. It gives you this fine-grained control over the execution flow, ensuring that everything happens in the right sequence, even across multiple classes.
Now, this interview I sent over mentioned something called parameterized tests via XML. Is that related to the data-driven testing we discussed earlier?
It is related, but with a slightly different twist. So parameterized testing is all about making your tests more flexible by allowing you to pass in external values. And one way to do this is through the TestNG XML file.
So instead of hard-coding values into your tests, you can supply them from an external source. That sounds pretty handy.
It is. Let's say you have a test suite that needs to run against different environments, like development, staging, and production. You can define environment-specific parameters like server URLs or database credentials in your XML file, and then run the same tests against different environments just by tweaking those parameters.
That sounds way more efficient than writing separate tests for each environment. I imagine it would save a ton of time and prevent code duplication.
Exactly. Parameterized tests are a great way to make your tests more reusable and adaptable to different scenarios.
Okay, this is all starting to click. Last question before we move on. The interview also mentions soft assertions and hard assertions. Those sound kind of intriguing.
They are, and understanding the difference between soft and hard assertions is actually crucial for effective testing. So let's start with hard assertions. These are the traditional assertions you're probably used to. If a hard assertion fails, the test execution stops immediately.
So it's like hitting a brick wall, the test stops right there, and you only get information about that one failed assertion.
That's a good way to put it, and there are definitely times when that's the right approach. If something fundamental is wrong, there's no point in continuing. But sometimes you want to check multiple conditions within a single test, even if some of them fail. That's where soft assertions come in.
So soft assertions are more forgiving. They let you keep going even if you encounter a hiccup along the way.
Exactly. With soft assertions, you can have multiple assertions within a test. And even if some of them fail, the test will continue to run, all the failures are collected, and then at the end of the test, you get a report of all the issues.
That's incredibly useful. I imagine it would be really helpful for, validating multiple fields in a form or testing a complex workflow where you want to see all the potential problems.
Got it. Soft assertions give you a more holistic view of what's going on and can save you a lot of time and effort during debugging.
This is all making so much sense. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand the power and flexibility of TestNG.
And we're not done yet. There are still a few more cool features we need to explore, like how to temporarily exclude tests and the magic of dependency injection with the @factory annotation.
Well, I'm all ears. All right. Okay, we're back for the final part of our TestNG deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground from annotations and reporting to listeners and those, clever soft assertions.
Yeah, and now we're going to tackle a question that often comes up, like what happens when you need to temporarily disable a test? Maybe you're working on a new feature and a particular test keeps failing, but you don't want to delete it entirely.
Oh, yeah, that's happened to me more times than I can count. Usually I just end up commenting out the test code.
Yeah.
Which can get messy, especially if you forget to uncomment it later.
Right. TestNG has a much cleaner solution. The exclude tag. You can use this tag in your TestNG XML file to specify which test methods you want to skip for a particular run. It's like telling TestNG, hey, just ignore this test for now.
So you don't have to touch your actual test code at all. You just make a simple change in the XML file, and TestNG handles the rest. That's pretty elegant.
It is. It keeps your code clean and makes it easy to manage which tests are included or excluded from a run. Now, before we wrap up, there's one more powerful TestNG feature we need to discuss, dependency injection with the @factory annotation.
Okay, dependency injection sounds a bit intimidating. Can you break that down for us?
Think of it this way. Imagine you have a test class that tests a login process, but you want to test it with different sets of credentials, maybe an admin user, a regular user, and a guest user. Instead of creating separate test classes for each user type, you can use a factory to create instances of your test class dynamically, each with different data injected.
So the factory is like a little machine that spits out customized versions of your test class. That's a pretty cool concept.
It is, and TestNG makes this easy with the @factory annotation. You essentially create a method that returns an array of objects, each representing a different instance of your test class with different data. TestNG then runs the tests for each of those instances.
It sounds like a supercharged version of data-driven testing. You're not just feeding different data to the same test, you're actually creating different versions of the test itself, each tailored to a specific scenario.
Exactly. It's incredibly powerful for testing complex workflows and scenarios where you need a high degree of customization.
This has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for TestNG. It's not just a simple testing framework, it's like this comprehensive toolbox filled with all sorts of clever tools and techniques for writing better tests, running them efficiently, and understanding the results.
And the best part is we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore with TestNG, but hopefully this deep dive has given you a solid foundation to build upon.
Absolutely. I'm already thinking about how I can apply these concepts to my own projects. So to all our listeners out there, if you're looking for a powerful and flexible testing framework, TestNG is definitely worth checking out.
And remember, the world of software testing is constantly evolving, so never stop learning, experimenting, and pushing the boundaries. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one developing the next generation of testing tools.
Well said. Until next time, happy testing, everyone.